our economy recorded its first consecutive quarter of growth, expanding by 1.2% in the second quarter of 2021. In other words, from the beginning of April to the end of July. It follows a revised 1% rise in the first quarter. That's from Statistics South Africa. Agriculture, trade and mining sectors performed the best. Manufacturing and construction fared badly in that period. Community and social services contributed 30.8% towards the share of employment. Trade, construction, agriculture, still the biggest employers in South Africa.
Is that community and social services contributed 30.8% in terms of share of employment, which is higher than its share of nominal GDP, sitting at 25.5%. So is trade, construction and agriculture, which have always staked their claim in relation to their contribution to employment as opposed to their share of nominal GDP. I must admit that this community and social services, we have taken private household services that have gone up there, and indeed it has shown such a larger increase in terms of its share of employment.
Well, all of these news figures that are out today show our economy is still smaller than it was before the pandemic. And what that means is that fewer people have jobs now. You'll know this has got to be one of the biggest problems we face. After the pandemic, the huge number of young people who are unemployed. The figure now of people who would like to work but can't must be around 12 million people. But there are several government programs designed to create jobs for people and to help them into long-term employment. Kristal Duncal-Williams is the project lead at Youth Capital. Kristal, good afternoon to you. How do we assess if all of these programs to get young people into work are actually themselves working? How do we assess their effectiveness?
Good afternoon, Stephen. That's a good question. So I think what you will hear from government, for example, the latest Basic Education Employment Initiative is, they will say it was so successful because 320,000 opportunities were created. And this language around opportunities is problematic because it doesn't actually tell you how it impacted that young person and how it equipped them to step into a next opportunity. So these are public works opportunities are inherently meant to be short-term stopgap opportunities because we can't expect government to employ everybody for forever. But what this program should really be doing is equipping young people to access their next opportunity. And their reporting on these programs lacks that insight currently. And at Youth Capital, we really believe that's problematic because that's where the magic of the program is and the true impact it can have on a young person should be measured.
So, one example is the expanded public works program. It's supposed to have made a difference to hundreds of thousands of people. It's short-term work. It's not permanent employment. And as you point out, it shouldn't be long-term employment. But does being employed for a short term in the expanded public works program have a long-term impact on someone's life?
So again, we actually currently at Youth Capital are having these discussions with people to say, if you look at the Public Works annual reports, you can see how many people had access to an opportunity. You can see how many people maybe got some training. But the actual impact on that person's life is not something that we're tracking or measuring at the moment. And in our recent survey that we did with young people who had gone through the Basic Education Employment Initiative, our recommendations, one of them is around the training that's provided during these opportunities must be transferable training. For instance, if these young people got training on grade 5 maths, that's not really a transferable skill that's going to help them access the next opportunity. However, if they were given computer literacy skills as part of the training, that's a transferable skill. So I think we need to think about the training we provide for people, and also do we give them reference letters, which we know for a fact helps them access the next employment opportunity. And these things are not being measured at the moment, and I think this is a serious missed opportunity. And then also the length of employment. Short term is one thing, but 3 to 4 months in a schooling system, half of which was over the school holidays, means that young people were only really in the positions for, 2 months, 3 months in some cases. And is that really enough time for young people to get training and skills? Because the whole point of these opportunities is to give young people without experience some work experience, because we know having work experience, again, puts you in a favorable light when you apply for future jobs. So I think these are some of the things we need to think about a little bit more strategically for the amount of money we invest in these programs to make sure that that there is a return on investment for them.
Well, I mean, I think perhaps, Kristal, you're being quite polite. A missed opportunity, I think, is the phrase that you use. But, I mean, as you say, we're spending a fortune. Now, I've got no problem with providing employment or even just employment opportunities for people who are not able to work. Of course we must do that. But we're going to do it so much better if we assess it.
Absolutely. And I think, I often come back to this in terms of government reports. We think of things as checkbox exercises in this country. So matric pass rates, number of opportunities created. But what does that really translate to? And what about everybody else that gets left behind in these conversations when we reduce something down to an oversimplified number? So if we look at the journey of young people from education through to employment, it's a complex journey. And I think why we keep missing the mark in youth employment is because we try to simplify that narrative. When actually it is complicated, and that means it's a difficult thing to do, but we keep making the same mistakes. So I think there are obvious wins here. If you look at the care economy, there's a lot of conversation around after-school programs and ECD centers and needing ECD practitioners to run these centers. We know we need early childhood development centers. We know that schools need support. These are things that are in communities already. So we know that having work in your community is much easier for young people on transport costs. And it's also a benefit to the community. So the country needs these people. The government is investing money in employing people into short-term places. And so it seems like an obvious missed opportunity if we don't make sure that the training of these young people really equips them to create career pathways for themselves.
Is there any evidence at all, any research at all, that shows some programs work better than others? Or are we literally still just working in the dark?
So I think there's some, if you're in the Western Cape, we can look at the Year Beyond program, which is a year-long program that uses public works money to employ young people in after-school programs, and they show great outcomes, both for the schools and the learners where, that young people serve, but then also for the young people themselves and their ability to access future education. A lot of them go on to further education, but also other job opportunities. If we look further afield, we can look at China. In the 80s, they did a lot of public works opportunities, and they had a very different model. But I think what's interesting from there is their poverty reduction was huge, and it wasn't just focused on young people, but what they really did was they looked at the needs in the rural communities where these unemployed people were and said, if we create infrastructure, if we have agricultural production where we pay these unemployed people in rural areas to perform these services, we actually revive these local economies. And then that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you're creating an economy that can sustain itself and maybe create more jobs out of these public works opportunities. So I think there are lessons from other countries that we could learn from.
There's a huge focus at the moment on providing linkages for young people from unemployment into jobs. I mean, we know that, as I say, 12 million people would like to work. If you went and offered them a job now, I think I'm sure they would take it. But if there was enough demand for workers, I don't know if providing those linkages would be a problem. What I'm trying to get to is the problem not with the linkage, not with the lack of experience. Are there actually jobs for them to go into? It doesn't seem like it. Or it really talks about the skills gap. There are jobs, and there's some evidence of this, that people who have skills are actually, getting paid more and more and more because the skills are scarce. But there aren't jobs for people without skills.
Absolutely, Stephen. So I keep saying this exact same thing. If we waved a magic wand tomorrow and made enough jobs for all the unemployed people in South Africa, young people would still not be able to take up those jobs because our schooling system is not equipping young people to step into the world of work. There are issues of financial literacy, of just basic communication and teamwork and things that the schooling system isn't equipping young people with. So they step out into this abyss of nothing and then are put into a working situation where they're expected to be at a level and have certain skills that they just don't have. And until we find a way of supporting young people to have those skills, and that's, and then on top of it, as you say, the very specific educational skills and qualifications that the job market is looking for, we're going to keep running into the same problem of these stopgap measures that might give young people a little bit of a salary and some experience, but it doesn't really change their lifetime trajectory of an earning potential over their lifetime.
And I mean, I try to be an optimist, Kristal, but if you look at the fourth industrial revolution, the fact that if you don't know, the sort of upper end of what goes on in a cell phone and how all of that works in apps, if you don't have those kind of skills, you're not going to find a job. But the people who have those kind of skills are likely to come from better off families, likely to have been at we still call them a former Model C school in the suburbs, or a private school, independent school, perhaps. What I'm trying to say is inequality in our country, already worst in the world, it's just going to get worse.
Absolutely, and that's why at Youth Capital we always focus on our action plan, and we say there are 10 points in here, they're difficult points, but you have to look at the whole pipeline. At the education level, we have to look at the entire journey of young people. If we're not giving them basic language and math skills, there's no way they're going to be equipped for the fourth industrial revolution. And even if you overcome that, then you need a post-school education that has all of the softer skills. I know there's many surveys on LinkedIn that look at, employers are looking for softer skills in an economy that's changing all the time, in a fast-paced world where, the types of jobs that are out there in 5 years' time are going to be completely different, what's in demand to what's in demand now. But what's important is those soft skills that make you flexible and able to move between those different jobs. And we are just failing our young people in creating that pipeline at present. And until we fix that, we're going to continue to see a rise in the youth unemployment rates, unfortunately.
Kristal Duncan-Williams, project lead at Youth Capital. Really appreciate the time, sobering conversation. Thank you.